Chyba już. Dzień dobry. Witam Państwa serdecznie na...
Hello and welcome. This is the second panel of today's conference. We are overjoyed to have you here. And let me present you our guests. Andrzej Andrysiak, Association of Local Newspapers, publisher of Radomsztańska Gazeta, Życie Warszawy legal newspaper. Locals is the name of the book. An official story of the local self-government, and Mała Władza, Little Power, on Tok FM. Rafał Remont, szczeciner.pl publisher. This SLAPP was absurd because questions to the mayor of Gryfino was the starting point. He was the supervisory board head of PGE. He believed these as libel, and he filed a court case. We'll be returning to this. Łukasz, Religa, information portal, Kujawski portal, the initiator of the complaint to Electronic Supervision Office, because the local government had their own services and newspaper. We'll be returning to this. And we'll be referring to that. And Jarosław, Mazanek, journalist and publisher and editor-in-chief of Gazeta Myszkowska. He was sued by Law and Justice because the fascist party brings their forces together was the title. The board of publishers, of local boards, commented it this way: we don't assess whether the fascist party is right or wrong. This is our opposition to have court limitation to limit the possibility to speak. The right to air out your opinions is protected, so every entity might be criticized, even in the harshest way. Law and Justice and swift indication of the time for the court case is not about the good name of the party, but to block the activities of journalists. It's a chilling effect. It's a good starting point to start our discussion. We have divided it into three parts. The first, SLAPP list of negative hit list. Panelists were requested to prepare their own anti-hits, how it works in local newspapers. Who is the first one? I'll tell you my story. It's exceptional, not only in Poland, but also all over Europe. Because being a local journalist, I started being interested in Mieczysław Sawarin's story. A tax authority for Dolna Odra powerhouse owned by PGE. He was a board member at the same time in PGE. In Gryfino, where he was the mayor of, and he's still the mayor of, he was again elected to be a mayor. It was loud and clear information about the conflict of interest. It comes as no secret that a decision maker when it comes to taxes for PGE cannot sit on the board of the company that pays taxes, local taxes. It shouldn't have happened, but it did. And my problems, legal problems, started by me sending questions to the spokesmen of Polish energy group, PGE. These were simple questions. It was like this: PGE, don't you see the conflict of interest? The person who decides about the tax level for PGE sits on the board of the company that pays taxes. Never did I receive the answer, but I was sued, and for 6 years I had to face them in courtrooms. First and second instance, I was sentenced. The courts decided there was a twisted question with suggestive answers. The article was never published because everything has finished at the information collection stage. The Supreme Court noticed that it shouldn't have landed in the court of law, should have finished earlier, legally wise. There should be no court case. The court's attitude is surprising for me. Somebody might have felt offended this or that way. Politicians should take this into consideration. And the court said that the journalist has no right to ask. A journalist, if they need to be diligent, they should ask questions to prepare materials in the most robust way. And the court said, no, you cannot ask questions. So how to have a robust press material in this situation? Łukasz, what is your hit list? 3 examples, and the third one 2 days ago. I want to mention it. I'd like to mention specific features and my observation on SLAPP. I was requested to visit here. I was supported by Watchdog, International Press Institute. I thank for that. I informed organizers that I cannot give you the details because this is an ongoing process. What I said now is a lot. I'm kind of limited when it comes to specific milieus. And the first hearing, this interesting facts for public opinion were disclosed. You cannot write about them. Comrades in grey uniforms, you know what that is. Kalisz international scandal. We had a number of these in Bydgoszcz, a number of incidents. 2020, June was the time. There were the scenes, obscene scenes, because they were protesting in front of the Orthodox Church where there were Ukrainians. You know, their opinions about Ukrainians. Death to enemies. There was a person wearing a grey uniform and he was associated with local sports milieu. So we had a publication informing that this gentleman was wearing this outfit. In response, we got a court. We were sued. So Agora and Xenophobic Behavior Center was also sued, summoned. It is important to protect your personal things if somebody writes lies, but they didn't indicate what was wrong. And the claimant says it infringes their personal rights. They filed a court case. This is one example. And the other example, a strange case 2 or 3 years ago. A local businessman got public subsidies, National Freedom Institute and similar. So we described that, and we were requested to remove publication in pre-court proceedings because it infringed their rights. It was about chilling effect. At some point, it landed in the court of law. So we had a problem, we and the attorney, because there was a series of links without saying what is not true, what is wrong. So we didn't know how to refer to it. So we referred to each of these in details. There was the body of evidence and witnesses, and they withdrew after a response. So the thing was, it wasn't about protection of personal rights, but everything that was around. Pre-court letters, the summon, the writ, in order to exert psychological pressure. A thing from a few days ago, I want to air it out. Last week, there was the session of Bydgoszcz City Council, and there was the protest of non-public school parents with the private owner. I'm not saying who's right or wrong, but I learned 2 days ago, a day after the process, these people got letters to pay money on infringement of personal rights. 10,000 zlotys is the amount. And there's a threat that there'll be penal proceeding, Article 212, the infamous one. It's strange because you try to find somebody for using their civic rights. This is what I wanted to say here, so that there is a signal from this conference. Some people may come to senses. Thank you. The most famous case, not most important from my perspective, fascism question. Why did I write it? You call black black and white white. You don't blur colors. It was not the most painful slap in my case, for a number of reasons. That was civil litigation, not penal litigation. If you want to speak about this case, well, let's not speak about court, how they work. We could have a separate conference. Other media might have noticed this. You sue journalists from the other corner of Poland, far away in Warsaw, so that it takes so long to travel. We wanted to transfer it to the competent court, but I wanted to be a kind of martyr, so I wanted to stay with this in Warsaw. My perspective, not many people know it. I got hit in SLAPP in court proceedings that continued for years, many of them finished. But when I talked to my attorney of laws, who's been working for us for a number of years, he set up the branch of his legal house in our building so that we are in closer contact. Personal goods proceedings continue for years. And they include even more and more articles that I send. I write an article. It is authorized by the attorney of law. He says it's a great article, but they will sue us this or that way, no matter what you write. Political pressure, possible. You might look for it. But the good change, dobra zmiana, was example of that. There was a judge that represented dobra zmiana, law and justice, political slogan, and it was proved in the court of law. I can use it legally. I don't want to compete with Wyborcza. I'm not jealous when it comes to the number of court proceedings, but this is the phenomenon. A local journalist, civil litigation, penal litigation. There was a week that, you work 5 days, and I've got 3 hearings in 3 different cities. So where am I supposed to work? Piotrków, Częstochowa, somewhere else. I had to be ready for that. When to write articles even about this. So this is the intimidation example. I'd like to seize this opportunity. SLAPP is in a broader perspective. It's a legal notion, so intimidation with legal tools. There are many cases apart from mine. Legal SLAPP brings about hate speech. This is abused. This notion is abused. But you know, hate speech is a crime. If somebody is called a hater with no proof, you just handle abuse against somebody, well, you can connect the dots. There is a prosecutor's proceeding, but it's not to be discussed. But it's worth showing some facts. This is not publicly available. And then all of a sudden on Twitter, we've got some quotations from the files. So we learn how. So we've even proven persons who are judges might have been sued to act to the detriment of the legal system. Let's give it to the prosecutor's office. And there are famous names. I don't know whether you remember which judge wanted to start disciplinary proceedings against local courts judges in Warsaw who wanted to put Wąsik and Kamiński in the office. It was an injunction. He writes about me on Twitter. So they are connected. A local journalist, I may not be known in Warsaw because I'm in Myszkowska and Zawiercie, but I'm of interest to a judge who was important in Warsaw. He is the Dobra Zmiana, good change judge. You can put them on the list. And the last sentence, out of court questions. They are very important. In my case and case of many people, you can connect the dots. These things are connected. 1,000 pages of court files. You take one page and it is negative when it's published separately. You've got the court stamp and people believe it. It's hated and hate carries on. This is hate speech, in my opinion. This is what I was saying. Even yesterday, anti-SLAPP directives relate to that, because we should have tools to defend ourselves. Sometimes you prove who is the attacker, who is the slapper, who is the blackmailer, but you cannot virtually take everybody to court. Sometimes you might have an exemplary proceeding for offending people on the internet. It happened that people wrote that I was responsible for the death of a person. He got killed in a car accident. I was not the owner of the car or a tree that he slammed into. So SLAPP and the other part. SLAPP is the starting point. And we have internet blackmail. So there is great room for changes. Simply speaking, you cannot get the data from Meta. The prosecutor's office don't get it. And one more element. I noticed intimidation used, blackmail used in a campaign during the time when nothing should be published. Thank you very much.
Ja Państwu opowiem jedną.
I would like to tell you a story of a SLAPP we experienced and the consequences. Well, the end of the story is what I would say several kilometers away from here. The case started in 2018 in Gazeta Radomszczańska. We published an interview with Anna Milczanowska MP about courts, about the judiciary system. We discussed whether MPs can recommend someone or find a job in the state treasury, companies. She said no, it's positive recommendation only. This was quite That was the period when President Duda vetoed some projects, and it was about specific prosecutors who might find it easier to deal with a case in the market without giving any names. The feature was published in March. In August, we published feature about legal office. We mentioned the shareholders' names, that it monopolized services in local authorities. We had pre-term election, and since then, 90% of all cases were handled by that referenced law office, earned 1 million zlotys for a year, during a year and 2 months. We wrote that feature. Next, a press conference was called. We were informed that litigation could be expected, but unfortunately, before the press conference, they had not checked that the feature was based on the material, on publicly available material. So the litigation was not possible. That was August. In 2018, we had local elections. The same group won, and we were sued. We got litigation from the law office for the interview with Anna Milczanowska, published in January. In the litigation, the law office informed that we should censor the MP, that we shouldn't publish her opinion. If you got such litigation, you would treat it as fun and forget it. Our lawyer responded to the litigation. We went to the court proceedings, and the judge asked the claimant whether they really wanted to sue us because the MP really said these words. And the judge said, now I'm going to quote, perhaps this is a graphic interpretation, you can understand it this way, and could you modify the litigation? Yes, we will modify the litigation. They did, they amended it. There were some hearings. They mentioned how the publication damaged their lives. Their children couldn't pass the school leaving exams. They couldn't sleep. The contractors decided not to work with them. They requested 30,000 and apologies. In the first instance, statement was issued urging us to apologize, but without any financial consequences. So we appealed against it to the second instance. It was the decision was supported, and we published it in 2021. That was the end of the story, but it continued. Only quite recently have I learned that there are 3 shareholders to the law office, and one of them became the president of Polska Press board, one of the major media corporations. We can talk about SLAPPs, we can discuss them. And now it seems our authorities award such behavior. Thank you. Lots of stories, but having a lot in common. The contrast between David and Goliath in the title of our conference, this is quite apparent, quite evident. I would like to focus on the subject matter, which might seem supplementary, but not really. But it's not really so. The second part of this conversation is entitled "Should a mayor be the editor-in-chief?" We all know that SLAPPs are instruments of party-ruled country, party-ruled state, and some members of local authorities who do not accept controlling independent media and independent journalists and use all possible measures to combat independent journalism. On the one hand, we have litigations, but also corrections that do not match the definition of SLAPPs. However, they are time-consuming and burdening. We can also observe that local media are not only bulletins informing about vaccinations or waste removal. However, they aspire to be like regular media or websites, and they are often used to fight with independent journalists. They have become an additional tool for local authorities. Hence the title of this part of our discussion and the question to you. Should a mayor be the editor-in-chief? Is it also the source of problems for our journalists when it comes to SLAPPs? Oh, that's my favorite topic. That's why I'm so keen on talking about it. Yes, a mayor, the head of the commune, cannot be an editor-in-chief, but actually they are. It's not direct. They have either some president's journalists in the company. I would like to start with defining what local authorities media are about. It's not about bulletins. We've got several hundreds of them. They can be published, but they are used for sharing some local news. Nobody actually reads it unless there is some practical information. But local authority is a monster which looks like regular media, radio, television stations, and websites, as well as press. Local authorities publishing their own media do not do it to make access to information more attractive for inhabitants. They say it's only about it. We publish a newspaper because elderly people from our community requested so, as they are digitally excluded. I asked whether such conviction was based on some data. No. And you can find the data on seniors who are digitally excluded, and this percentage is quite low. The explanation, there are plenty of types of explanations, typically not true. It's simply about such publishers as us or those operating in towns. That's the problem in Gdańsk, Poznań, Wrocław, Łódź, Warsaw, not so much. It's about cities where local authorities spend millions. I calculated it once and learned that in 2020, 10 cities spent 140 million on local government media within a year. 140 million. I referred to 10 biggest cities, but there are also towns, villages, and municipalities doing the same. So I suppose it amounts to around 1 billion. Local authorities and local governments are not willing to share such information. That's what the environment of local media in communes, counties and municipalities look like. It's similar to what we had between 2015 and 2023 on the TV market. We have propaganda TV, Kurski's TV, and we have local government's media trying to deprive others from their opinions by controlling information, cutting down financing, and using other tools. And finally, last thing, it's not done under the colors of a specific political party. It's both right-wing, left-wing, liberal, everybody does it. I'll be very happy to join this discussion. The answer is sure they shouldn't, and it should be banned, but in practice it looks different. I'm not pessimistic in this respect. Let me explain why. There are some positive and negative examples. The mayor of Myszków, ruling the town for 14 years and now having another term of office, had a short episode of publishing a kind of local newspaper, and he has never used this type of propaganda. But there is an opposite example. The recent term of office of local parliament in Zawiercie disseminated propaganda by engaging all municipal companies and officials, and that person lost the election. So this shows you can combat it. Sometimes it deprives us of some measures and resources to function. It jeopardizes our functioning on the competitive market. However, such activities, and the example of Zawiercie show that's stupid strategy. Lots of money was spent, and the mayor lost the election. Definitely, it would be better to disseminate true information and run fair campaign. In my opinion, that's an extreme example of pathological publication. The same applies to the county. When we wanted to find out how much it cost through publicly available information, it turned out that the publication of the local magazine cost 5 times more than publishing a standard newspaper. It's more difficult to investigate it if the money is allocated to specific positions. You cannot check how much the person earns. There is a general description of the position, and actually these people spread propaganda, but we cannot check how much the people earn because this is not publicly available information. This is not the level of positions that would require disclosing their remuneration. A new thing that I became aware of is that there were 2 magazines, one published by the county and one by the hospital, in the hospital newspaper in Zawiercie. There was a situation in which public money was used for election propaganda for one committee and against another. The hospital, or the hospital's director, admitted he established his own committee with his employees. It was like coup d'etat in this particular county. We could compare it to a situation of a real coup d'etat. Most of such activities derive from democracy. You have to combat democracy to do it. It's as if the general staff established its committee, select MPs, and determine the army's budget. In my opinion, that would bear some premises of a coup d'etat. There are, it cuts both ways. The scale of abuse has expanded over recent years. That's a real craze. It's not only about papers, but we need to remember the space in which we're not able to compete when the president's employees establish Facebook profiles, run like a website, but formally you cannot identify who publishes it. They typically focus on some trivial things that people click. However, from time to time, political content intertwines. In local, for the local aspect, there are quite many viewers. And they start to engage in some political actions. Even if you would like to sue somebody, you don't know who, because it's hard to identify. The internet space is cunningly developed as pseudo websites. We have been running a website for several years now. It's growing and thriving, but we can be sued. We were promised that Article 212 would be abandoned. The magazine published by Hospital, what were its articles about? Typically, they were praising themselves. However, in the pre-election period, it was an election magazine. You have, if you have the name of the committee you shouldn't vote for and the one that you should support, I hope that owing to my article where I ridiculed the situation ended as it ended. In my opinion, it's not right to use public money for such propaganda. It's pure propaganda. It's not only about spoiling democracy. However, in my opinion, it was breaching the law, at least from the point of view of financing the electoral campaign. Before we move on, I would like to hear your answers to the question, to what extent the local government's publications are the weapon to combat independent journalism. It's also an interesting aspect that matches the topic of our conference.
I'll try to refer to that, but I'll start with the question whether a mayor should be the editor-in-chief. I'll give you a different answer. It would be fairer situation to what we have now. If we had the mayor's name as the editor-in-chief, you would see now we have an employee or a worker of a communal company. They never write anything about mayors. So it's unfair. Professor Hausner had the report about the state, and he had a clear description of this pathology. Let me tell you this way. I've got Bydgoszcz experience. I wouldn't compare it with SLAPPs. But the problem with these publishing houses is as follows. Much we speak about these bulletins, newspapers, but it evolves into different formats. You asked about competitors. We've got the internet. In Bydgoszcz, there is the official profile of the city, 160 viewers. No media enjoy these capabilities. And there are posts that they pay for it. You do not have to follow the rationale of spending money. Every publisher had their calculations. It does not pay off to buy article promotion on Facebook, because if it is not clickable, you add extra money to that. You cannot recover it with advertisements. The financial outlays. Andrzej mentioned seniors, that this is the main argument. We are losing the debate because local government newspapers criticize local media and do it less often, because we are becoming the ones that shout than offer more often than give arguments. And arguments related to rule of law are not present. The right to get information created without interference of public authorities. It's human rights according to the convention. So we are devoid of these arguments. What is missing for me? The organizations that criticize, that watchdogs, Helsinki Foundation, they should contact specific mayors, writing that this title may infringe that or this convention. Discussions would be different. The situation, the narrative would change in specific local governments. What else do I want to mention? Not only newspapers. Kujawia and Pomeranian province has got a company. They used European Union's money for international promotions of the region. They used this pool of money for expansion of business missions, but they used the money to create a portal that's got official name, promotion of the region, and there are interviews with politicians about who's going to be a candidate of the party to become the mayor of Toruń. So topics vary. We can speak at length here. My perception of the problem is different, because all this publishing, all this media, are the media that pretend to be fully fledged independent media, and bulletins are different things. Speak of bulletins, we can discuss it, whether public money should be spent on that. But I may understand that a local government may want to spend money to inform inhabitants that they've done this or that investment, that we intend to do something else, because they've got the right to speak about their achievements. They cannot be denied that. It's their right. But it's a different thing when you create media that pretend to be independent only to cut away funds for the media that are watchdogs. I've heard about stories of this kind in Szczecin. There were politicians who suggested local companies providing services for public administration not to advertise in specific media. These companies want to create a media image, but they are afraid to publish it in the media indicated not to publish in, because otherwise they lose tender. They will be excluded from the subcontractors list whenever it is associated with the city, a town hall, commune, the big one, the small one. communal company owned by the city or voivodeship or province. Problem of financing results in the fact that independent media have problems functioning in small markets. Szczecin portal. I came up with this idea a year ago. There was a niche to have a published media. The media that is not associated with any offices. So the journalist quality that we have is different. There is growth of readers numbers. They look for right content. Media can have a rat race to say who had the accident in the city center. This is not my aspiration. But we look at many problems differently compared to all others in the area. When there are no drivers in public communication as a problem, we try not to attack the mayor or the CEO of the company, but we try to find reasons why people do not want to work as public transport drivers. I am a proponent of such journalism because we have many positive opinions, feedback, because many Szczecin people started to look differently, they say so, after our publications, to compare it to other media, the perception. We offered a comprehensive review. We talked to drivers, we asked them in details, was it about money, a rolling stock to have it newer? And they said no. Problem? The users of public transport who call drivers names because he didn't sell a ticket quick enough. The people on the bus were drunk, so they didn't like the work atmosphere. Good media is able to defend its position. They can compete with media sponsored by the local government. But you cannot subsidize them ad nauseum because this is, a commercial product this or that way. So working out a methodology to have independent media to acquire funds for operations, and colleagues mentioned that something should be forbidden. This should be forbidden, yes and no, because public funds should not be earmarked for propaganda, for media that disseminate propaganda, no doubts about it. But we don't have to introduce big changes in law. To my liking, there are many regulations that say that you can be sued for financial discipline infringement. This is penal code, that is the basis. And there are courts that support the media in this kind of dispute. If we, journalists or publishers, if we try to seek justice in a court case, nobody would be fined for spending money on media. I don't believe that. We are cut off from information because office-related or local government-related journalists are the first to get information, or the officers, simply speaking. It is associated with the fact that, there is Public Access Act. Theoretically, there are sanctions for not giving information, but this does not happen. The spokesperson of an office or state-owned company, they cannot, nothing can be done to them. Can I briefly relate to this? Yes, the question from the audience. I disagree. Let me give you the example from Lower Silesia. Regional accountancy office offered guidelines. Local media cannot have advertisement, and they pay 500 zlotys fine. Two examples. Local government media, do they fight with local media? Right-wing mayor in Trzebnica, my favorite, 48 pages every 2 weeks. 50% are advertisements from the market and from companies. 30, 40 photos of the mayor, a few on a page. Nowa Gazeta Trzebnicka by Daniel Długosz. So a free one that is given every 2 weeks with so many advertisements delivered free of charge to every house. And Daniel Długosz, who makes a living as an entrepreneur, he fights for readers. Local government media, should we have it? Świdnica, left-wing mayor, portal 24 Hours Świdnica. They were cut off from information. She gives it in the mode of public information. It takes 2 weeks. In Trzebnica, there is one person unit to answer. And Daniel gets the information. You have to wait 3 months for the answer because it's difficult. This is how you fight with the media on a local government level. Question?
I represent the European Center for Press and Media Freedom. We're based in Leipzig in Germany. We've been provided support to journalists who have been slapped in the past here in Poland. I wanted to thank you for this panel, but I'm particularly touched by the story of Rafał. To get, if I understood correctly, and then I did a little bit of research, to get sued just because of the questions. I think this is one of the peaks of SLAPP cases that I've heard so far, and I worked in the last 6 years on many cases. For me, it's inspiring, your resilience and your resistance. I wanted to ask you a question, and then I have a comment. My question is whether the case is finalized or whether it's still in the appeal form in any way, and if this is the case, on behalf of ECPMF, we would like to provide our support if it's needed. And secondly, on the local journalism, of course, I don't know the context as good as you know here. Oops.
Tłumaczę Flutura Kusari z Europejskiego Centrum Mediów i Prasy. Na początku podziękowała Państwu za panel i za podzielenie się swoimi historiami. Też Flutura pracuje od wielu lat nad SLAPP-ami, także w Polsce i CPMF wspiera dziennikarzy. I Flutura zaznaczyła, że szczególnie była poruszona sprawą pana Rafała, czyli bycia pozwanym tylko za zapytania. I jej pytanie dotyczy tego, czy ta sprawa już jest sfinalizowana, czy ona jeszcze jest w toku.
It's about financial support. If there is a need, it is worth contacting ECPN. MFRR Consortium is also ready.
As I said, I don't know the context, so it might come differently compared to the context, but I wanted to say that I do agree with one of the panelists who said it's very difficult to forbid or ban mayors and local authorities from providing information to the public. And this information can come in many forms. It can be called a local media. It can be called the mayor's bulletin. It can be 50 pages with 100 pictures. I think the difference is in two aspects. One is to make sure that local people understand the difference between local propaganda and what journalists write about. And secondly, I think it's about advertisement. And this is the crucial difficulty that we're having in many countries. As long as the public authorities make sure that the money does not go to these media outlets which are established by the mayors, that should be within the freedom of expression. So ideally, we would have a situation where local people in different municipalities across Poland will understand when a media outlet, when a publication, let's call it publication, comes from mayor's office or people connected to authorities, and when is journalism, and to ensure that the public money does not go for propaganda reasons. But it's really dangerous to discuss from the perspective of how to ban mayors or local authorities from disseminating the information, even if that's propaganda.
Okay. To jeszcze teraz przetłumaczę.
And it is being translated back to English. And the second thing associated with the money. So if you stop access to money because it is given to hospital newspapers, that was a very interesting example. Other bulletins, local journalists are under finance. So there is lack of balance when it comes to possibilities. This is one of the things that we should start thinking about. Let me speak about this. My court case reached the final end. First and second instance, I was believed guilty. And the second instance conditionally discontinued the proceedings, and I was requested to pay money, financial fines, to cover the proceeding costs. And my possibility to appeal at the appellate court came to an end, but I was able to get in touch with Adam Bodnar, the then ombudsman, who instilled the procedure to cessate the proceeding at the High Court. It happened, and the Supreme Court supported this notion, saying that I could not have been fined for this, and I was acquitted. I was free of charges. It was informed that I could ask the question. I was running from one courtroom to another. You can imagine the stress load and private problems, because it always translates to family life and private life. Nobody can recover it, because I had a huge problem in recovering financial resources from Mieczysław Seweryn, who filed this writ. The court requested him to give the money back, but he was quite reluctant. I waited long, and just before the electoral campaign, it was suggestion he was running in the election for another time, so I'll get in touch with court and inform the Sąd and the media, informing all of them that the mayor did not respect and he didn't want to recover money, and it worked. I pulled that through, but it was unwanted, unnecessary stress.
First, I would like to thank you for offering assistance and help to me. So it really works. There are international organizations that do help. Well, it's natural to me to write that if we are supported by an organization based in Gniezno, and it's my natural inclination that I wrote that Nowogrodzki or Kaczyński will really suffer because I am supported by the Germans, because the organization has its headquarters in Leipzig. This is Saxonia, to the best of Saxonian government, who is the donor. Well, what you asked about is key for the future of local media. Without objective media, we cannot have democracy. And it's also about financing area. It's not about us, the media, to shut down the competitors. But we sometimes disagree, but we all know there is no place, no room for symmetrism. Previous years have revealed that if local governments have the opportunity to publish pseudo-press, they do it. There are some great examples that I have quoted. However, this is a minority. Whenever there is a negative phenomenon, we need to find a solution. A bulletin will always turn into press, or website will turn into propaganda if the mayor has such plans and if there is a strategy to pursue. In the majority of cases, it works like that. The solution, although I am not a professional in this respect, but more often than not, I can hear discussions stating that we need to find a formula for local media who are, as by principle, economically less powerful, to find the formula to co-finance them, but not to found them. We need to find such a way. It progresses over the years, and we are like clients for those who publish advertisements. We become more reliant on them. In order to write features, we need to have money. We do not need to publish paper because the market is changing and we know how to adapt it. But revenues from advertisements on websites having broader coverage, but we do not earn on them. If somebody buys a newspaper in a standard form, they pay for content and not for paper as material. So we need to have resources to work in order not to become clients of local governments, which I try to avoid. I always prefer relationships for major advertisement provider. Sometimes it happened that whenever there was a kind of problem, an affair, a gate, advertising companies didn't want to cooperate. If a magazine, a newspaper, depends too much on one group, on one advertisement provider, it's a negative situation. I don't know where I read the feature. Perhaps it was Wyborcza. I would like to thank you for mentioning these topics. We need to speak openly that we might need systemic support for local media. And this is not the case that it's not happening all over Europe. In the old member states, how to do it, I don't want to talk about it as I do not have sufficient knowledge. I was quite surprised that it really works like that. We can see the hazards related to disinformation. Small local websites or newspapers can do it. Okay, but could you please And your message, just to summarize, just to wrap up, it is worth discussing and choosing the best European solutions and implement them in Poland. I will give the floor to our next panelist. That's a topic for another conference devoted to this topic. It inspires lots of discussions. I would like to answer your question. There was a suggestion that readers should differentiate independent media from propaganda. That's what I also mentioned. We lack clear message to inhabitants stating that this type of media or this title is propaganda. It was about legal aspects as well. There are various discussions. We've got the decision of the European Tribunal of the Human Rights, Aliyev versus Russia. According to the European Convention on Human Rights, if the media depend on public authority, whether it's local government or central government, it violates the article, and that's how I would like to summarize it. All right, anything else on that topic? Okay, so we're going to move on to the third part of our meeting, and I suppose it's going to be a good summary of this panel. I would like to ask you what tools local publishers need to protect themselves against SLAPPs. We mentioned finance, but there is also another recipe, perhaps. There is an idea we have been considering in the Association of Local Newspapers. Unfortunately, it's expensive. It's all about the money that is supposed to be paid for proceedings. It's around 20,000 a year. If there are 3 simultaneous litigations, it might mean the budget that suffices for 3 months. Everybody knows that such proceedings are expensive. Typically, there is a law office in charge where the office purchases the services, and the mayor pays nothing. But if the mayor of a commune, town, city knew that the website or the newspaper won't pay for the service because there is an outsourcer who is going to represent them, at least half of the SLAPPs wouldn't go to courts. From the point of view of such a mayor or head of commune, it wouldn't make sense because it would generate no costs for the editorial house. So our idea was to create a kind of network so that we could announce, if you sue us, we have a legal office that would represent us. The mayor could hear it, and if they hear it's from Warsaw or Krakow, it would be a deterrent factor. I suppose half of the litigations wouldn't go to court. However, this is a strenuous, long-lasting process that we've been analyzing for a year and a half, and we don't know how to finance it. That's an interesting idea, but it has a certain drawback. Those who are sued more often would take advantage of it. However, the newspapers that do not enter conflicts could be sued more often. I don't know any details of the EU directive, and I am not a lawyer myself, though I am keen on law. However, I suppose there is a good idea that could facilitate our lives. If there are litigations, On the defendant's request, we could carry out a kind of test. I mean, the court should answer the question whether it's SLAPP or not, meaning that the court should check, and especially if this is a series of litigations, if there are several lawsuits against a small editorial team, perhaps identifying SLAPP could mean that the case is dismissed. Judges are afraid to do it because some could claim they had not investigated the case. This means if the case is dismissed, it would not generate any cost. The mechanism would force courts to investigate whether this is the procedure or not. In the Silesian region, there is no prosecutor's office that hasn't received notification from me. I often learn that the prosecutor's office in Jaworzno, Lubliniec, Bielsko, Częstochowa had some litigations against me. They shouldn't deal with cases from Myszków or Zawiercie. So, you know, it's like forum shopping a little bit. Thank you. So we've got some proposals to reform our judiciary. I'm very happy that Mr. Bodnar will visit us, and perhaps he could hear us now. I would simply share my findings and observations on what has been functioning. We've got, lawyers should pursue certain codes of ethics. A lawyer should not write a litigation if they can see and identify it is against the truth. But the truth is that someone writes SLAPPs. If so many lawyers had not been involved in such cases, we wouldn't have SLAPPs. I recently read an article on the subject matter. There was an interview with the spokesperson for legal profession discipline. So, well, you know, it's good money, all in all, and I wanted to highlight this aspect. But nowadays the prosecutors need to prove the blame. And now the burden of proof is on the claimant. If I have a litigation that someone's personal rights have been violated, it's really hard for me to guess what it's all about. Some litigations related to defamation definitely have some arguments, but unfortunately they are often abused and they have turned into a wrong direction. That's the aspect that should be considered. Well, you have exhausted the topic. All these arguments are right. If courts were willing, the cases like mine should be dismissed immediately. I should never explain why I asked the question. A fair judge should dismiss such a case immediately. And I was answering such questions for 6 years. It all starts with a reform of the whole judiciary. There is a new phenomenon related to the electoral code. The election mode is used like SLAPP a little bit. When some courts and neo courts have such a practice. We've got one court in Poland consisting of newly appointed judges. That's the one in Sosnowiec. Actions taken pursuant to the election law are quite specific. An editorial team gets a litigation at 3 p.m. You have to answer within 30 minutes. I'm not in the office. I have no access to the computer. I request 1 more hour. At 1 minute before 8 p.m., I get the court's statement. But Article 11 of the Election Code states that the court can look up upon a specific case only if the information about the proceedings is shared. In such a case, no such information was shared, and a statement is issued. A similar statement was issued by the same court related to a journalist or someone who wrote something on the internet, 5,000 zloty for an animal shelter, and apologies. What happens next? The decision is not the pronouncement is delayed, but the whole zawiercie gets the information and posters that someone is lying. Just a quick comment. We talked about law offices. We've got some of them that specialize in writing SLAPPs, fulfilling all requirements, making the court handle it. It's good that we do not have such specializations during law studies. Now I would like to give the floor to the audience. There is a lady at the back willing to ask a question. Agnieszka Podgórska, Watchdog Polska. First of all, I would like to thank you very much. I do agree with all the problems and proposals you have submitted. A reform of education, that's what I would add to the portfolio of modifications and amendments. We should consciously choose what we read. Łukasz, Religa, you mentioned a large organizations mentioned that such magazines are illegal, and that would change a lot. Watchdog Polska says this is illegal, but unfortunately it does not change anything. We carried out monitoring, asking questions to local communities about local authorities' newspapers. An interesting fact is that wherever the power in the newspapers accepted the opinions of the other political parties, the mayor, such a mayor, would lose election. They know perfectly how to use such newspapers, and this space has been used like that for many years so that these people maintain their power.
And high hopes are attached to education. This will trigger a change. We, citizens, ladies and gentlemen, we talk to those who have public authorities to say that these power-sponsored ones are illegal. This should be changed. So I was called to the table. There are general standpoints, but there are also abuses. Well, there is a mayor on every page, not with us, they say. So you need to speak which local government that is. You need to be precise in showing them. I remember newspapers. One newspaper, dozens of photos of mayor, new children, elderly, ribbon cutting ceremony. On a lighter note, because I find it sometimes funny, it was the positive end with Gryfino mayor, a local newspaper that was associated with this mayor and local authorities. They wrote the article, but it was colloquial. They didn't write Jarosław was wrong. The title was different. Jarosław does not have to apologize to Mr. Remont. Good legal changes, it's excellent, but legislation creation process takes time. And Parliament won't find it the most important thing. But I've got a plan. At the level of arguments, I can talk about it. This is education. I can give you examples. They are counter-effective. You talk to new mayors and those who retained powers, but they used propaganda once. Let's try to convince them, to persuade them to give up on that. Because this is wrong spending of public money. And this propaganda can be discredited. It is a propaganda. You show that this is not credible. And there's a third argument. This mayor, if they distribute the same money to give the existing portals or traditional newspapers, they have a better relationship with us. We remember that no money can buy us. But there is always relation of journalists and those in power. But it has not to be kind of pathology. No newspaper lives on the government's advertisements, a part of the budget, but not the main part of it. So when you are fair in ordering things, the same about large media houses, it's to the interest of the shareholders to have equal distribution from the state-owned companies. State-owned companies, we use less resources unless we are part of All Poland campaign that include local media. It is not the target unless automated advertisements on portals. Let's try to convince local governments to spend money in a more sensible way. Briefly, I thought that I was optimist, but you are an extra optimist, because convincing a mayor to give up on a newspaper that has been released and they know the result, it's a neck-breaking exercise. It's as if asking Kaczyński to give up on TVPs. They know what the results are, so they do not want to give up on that. Question, Marzena Błaszczyk, Civic Network. This is a comment from me. We are about to finish EMF project. We gave training to lawyers how to build the support networks. There's a legal clinic, public information specialist. We have cases like this, and we require to introduce lots of changes because this is knowledge for lawyers. We need to reach people all over Poland who are interested in these kind of issues. And we need to create the right procedures to safeguard people who call upon us with these problems. And I'd like to thank EMF for financing, but it's just a spoon in the ocean. Much more is needed. Andrzej will agree with me. Thank you. Marek Frąckowiak, Press Publishers Chamber. I'd like to refer to Watchdog Polska Lady, bigger organizations. Let me remind you, 20 years ago, 2004, we had a large-scale conference in Poland's Senate. Helsinki Foundation, the Publishers Association. It was about local government press. Local press and local government press. And the notion was local government press should not be there. It's illegal. It illegally gets advertisement. The three organizations represented here have repeated this for 20 years. They were quite vocal in this. We've tried to have the opinion of consecutive ombudsmen, and I've got a feeling that is reverse to what we spoke in the panel. We need to work hand in hand. We've been banging the hard wall of politicians, and these are all political parts of the scene. We filed a suggestion to update the press law as the chamber, together with local newspapers in the previous terms of office of the same. After the election, we wanted to talk to Mr. Andrysiak, one of the most important senators, and the catalogue of things that we spoke about that should be done for the president. He said yes, and local government press, and he said no, I'm not going to touch this because it's a bomb, political bomb that may explode. I'm saying this not to convince that it's not worth it, but you need to be persistent in doing that. When we speak about tax audit chambers, Mr. Religa's cases, 20 years ago, late attorney of law Michał Kulesza suggested this. Local publishers were suggested that we would publish the lawsuit on the Competition Law Act against communes that place advertisements as this kind of wrong competition, unjustified competition, but it shows the power of the other party. You need to keep on working. As an anecdote, there was a huge Mikołajki Congress, and there was a panel organized by us, and there was the message, enough of local government's press, and there were local government people. There were different people discussing it, and he said, I'm a mayor. I've just done away with the local government magazine, Just Bulletin, from near Warsaw. And I believe that he should be showcased at different fanfares. That would be a punishment rather than praise. The discussion that Marek was speaking about with this important senator from the ruling coalition. We were speaking different things, and local government newspapers, he said no. We cannot win with them. That was the government's communication, the ruling coalitions. Explain. I didn't want to say that we can convince mayors, city mayors. It was supposed to include into the public debate. If you defend democracy, should you give an interview for this kind of media? I'm happy that you believe I'm more optimistic than you are, but I can defend my opinion. It's possible when you can give clear example that propaganda were counter-effective. Zawiercie. There was a number of local government newspapers, Commune, Powiat. It was prostitution when it comes to the sense. Being a publisher and journalist, I've got arguments. Anonym's new mayor, who starts her terms of office, I hope she won't make the mistakes as the predecessor did. So if we show that these local government newspapers are an absurdity, they didn't help. They were to the detriment. Why should we repeat mistakes? So this is hope. And this commune leader, I'm wondering which commune that is. I'd like to hear it. We would like to protect him from other commune leaders that he followed this direction. Thank you very much. I'm happy that we have one more question. I'd like to express gratitude for your work because SLAPP, one of the panelists said, SLAPP is seen in Poland. Legal assistance, comprehensive legal assistance is important. We try to do it, but this is too little to avoid this freezing effect and to show it to the local government people. I'd like to refer to local government newspapers. I share the frustration mentioned here. We keep banging the wall with our head. There is some hope, not a fast highway, but an argument that you touched upon in discussion. Spending money for media services and unequal distribution and European Freedom Act that was accepted. This is the light to speak about. There may not be a direct connection, but we can use this argument that local governments, when they finance the media, they infringe this equal distribution principle, and it can be a contribution to the discussion that has continued for 20 plus years. When speaking about EU changes, European Parliament has noticed that information media will never reach the tabloids level. There is a stupid car jam. I take a photo from the window and 5,000 hits. And the article, when I put next to it, but I'm surprised, great article, I was working hard. And 1,000 hits only, 1,000 viewings. So the work that is more worthy does not have this kind of outreach. Thank you very much. We won't be speaking about outreaches. We have gone too long in this panel. It was interesting discussion that exceeds SLAPPs, but important for the whole journalistic media. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Teraz zapraszamy na przerwę obiadową, która będzie trwała godzinę, tak? I za godzinę kolejny panel. Now we're inviting everybody for lunch and we'll reconvene in 1 hour for the next panel.